So today we have another episode of Zooming in on nutrition. And we have a returning guest, Ricki McKenna, otherwise known as McHealthy. Ricki, would you tell those folks who are seeing us for the first time a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Patricia. Yes, I'd love to. I am a certified nutritionist for almost 23 years now. I started out really being concerned with nutrition when I had children. And looking back now on what I fed them, I did a pretty good job, but I had a few things in there. They kid me about fish sticks that came in a frozen package. So we don't do that anymore. It's all fresh. But I've gone through years of school. I still do, because as you probably realize, nutrition changes. The ideas about things, about supplementation and about certain elements, certain nutrients and so forth change. And of course, with the pandemic that I don't think we're actually through yet, there's been a lot of controversy over what do you take to prevent it or to keep yourself healthy or seriously boost your immune system, which can be done so you can possibly avoid, but at least ameliorate if anything happens as far as the coronavirus goes. So I've worked with big corporations like United Healthcare, American Diabetes Association, and with individuals and smaller organizations, individual families and people with kidney concerns and the elderly. And it's been a real combination of things. But basically, the one thing that I know that doesn't change is that food is the absolute key to your health. Bottom line, what you eat influences your health, your mental health, your emotional health, and overall your whole life. Because when you're healthy, you have wealth and you're able to do whatever God made you here, brought you here to do. So that is my soapbox speech is food is the key, and that's the end of it.
You have a company.
I do.
And it's
Choose Health Solutions, because health is a choice. True health is a choice. We all have choices. So I named the company. Used to be Practical Nutrition for Healthy Living, which I thought was kind of boring, actually. So I changed it to Choose Health Solutions.
And you assist many clients on that path to health using food through your work with that in that company.
That's my company, yes.
Yes.
And what I found was I don't really speak to the company. It's me. And it's me and everything that I've gained along the road to where I am now. My journey has been very interesting. And along the journey, I've worked with other people. I've worked with chiropractors. I've worked with nurses, a variety of people in the health arena. Doing massage also helps. And actually self-massage, especially tummy, belly massage and so forth, and exercise, which massages your inside, helps to make everything flow properly. So I've worked with trainers.
And recently you have published a new book.
Yes, I have. Thank you. And if I may, I will show you. It's called Yes, You Can Eat Well and Eat Right and Find the Joy of Cooking. And I always have a little trouble showing this thing online. Hello, I'm here. I had a very funny experience. We had guests for dinner a couple of weeks ago, and I had the book out on my kitchen counter. And one of the women walked into the kitchen where everybody gathers, of course. And she said, "Oh, that looks like you." And I said, "It is me." That's my new book. So
what a great way to open up the conversation to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very cute.
Yeah, and it's not just a cookbook, it is a cookbook. There are over 30 recipes in it. And it also has explanations of different foods. There's history of foods. We haven't always eaten foods the same way in throughout history. Things have changed. And it has some notes and ideas for doing things your own way. And one of the things I thought was everybody has their own choices for doing recipes. So I've got a recipe in here for carrots and green beans and sunflower seeds. And after each recipe, there is a blank page or two where you can put your notes in, how you prefer to fix things, or if you found you'd prefer to use, a different spice than I did, but basically using the recipe, and you're able to adapt it to your own likes, which is what I call intuitive cooking, where if you feel something smells good and you'd like it in the food and you like the combination, put it in. There's nothing for most of the recipes unless you're baking, and baking requires a little more precision. If you're making a chicken dish or a vegetarian dish or whatever, and you like more cumin, add some more cumin. And if you want to use something else besides parsley, use another herb. So I've left it for people to actually interpret for themselves with a basic recipe. And I think lots of interesting, fun things in there.
Great, great. And you also have two cooking shows that you're doing right now.
Yes, ma'am. I do what's called Ricki's Kitchen. And that's on Thursdays. It's at 11 o'clock Central Time. It's an hour's worth of interactive Zoom show. So it's similar to this in the format, and people can comment and ask questions, which is great. And as I said, it's an hour long from 11 a.m. Central Time to 12 noon. And then on Fridays, I'm part of a group of people who are part of USA Global TV, which is on YouTube. And on that venue, we're called the United Kitchens, because as we began that venture, there was a gentleman in Scotland who was cooking in Scotland, and I was cooking here in Houston, Texas. And so we united the kitchens. So that's the name of the program on YouTube. And that's from 12 noon to 1 on Fridays.
And I am, as everybody may know, Pat McMahon of Health Information Project. Well, let me say this exactly the way it's written out, and I'll put it up here too. I'm going to say www.health-info-project.com. And that is a resource for information, reliable and accurate, presented in a very caring way to my friends for the health problems that we all face. Now let's get to our questions that I wanted to ask you today.
Great.
Okay, what do you make of the low carb diets like Atkins? Is this worth pursuing? Are there such things as good carbs and bad carbs? And what are the foods that have these?
Okay. Thank you for the question. And yes, the low carb diet, after all the years of low fat dieting, people have eaten carbs such as breads and pastas and sweets, and anything with flour in it, with the exception of something like using cauliflower flour, popcorn, pretzels, anything like that. Those carbs, everything turns to sugar in your body. And when you're eating a low fat but high carb diet, all those carbs turn to sugar. And what sugar does is increase your glycemic index rush. It gives you instant energy, and yet your insulin has to follow it so it can help process it. So that when you're eating many, many carbs, when your insulin can't keep up with it, which it can't unless you're eating a balanced diet, what the body does is store those carbs as sugar in your body, and it turns to fat. So therefore, the low carb diet, I think, is very important. Right now, I'm pursuing one that's called a low sugar or low glycemic diet. Now, I want to back up a little bit and say, Pat, that diets will work for a little while. What people consider diets, I call diet everything you put into your mouth. But a weight loss diet or a weight management diet will last for a little while. You may lose weight if that's your objective. And yet, once you stop it and you start eating as you did before, you know what happens. It all comes back, and it comes back with a vengeance sometimes. So that what I have claimed for years is diets don't work. They do, but for a while. What works is lifestyle. Lifestyle, we can call it lifestyle changes, or just adapting a different lifestyle when it comes to food and exercise. Does that answer your, it is worth pursuing. And
Okay.
there are good carbs and bad carbs. Yes, that was your next question, I think. Yeah. Okay, the not so great, or they're not bad, but they're not as great as the complex carbohydrates. Things such as breads, pastas, refined carbs, anything that's been turned into a flour, like bagels. Sorry, people, I love bagels, but I think it's been 2 years since I've actually had one. No, I take it back. I did have half of one with some cream cheese a while back. I couldn't resist. But fruits, juices from fruits are refined carbs, because you're actually squeezing and you get the juices, which are wonderful, but they're full of sugar. They concentrate the sugar. For example, if you eat an orange versus just drinking orange juice, you get the same kind of energy, but you also get the other minerals and vitamins that are in the orange pith and the coats, the things that get squeezed out. So anything like that, popcorn, pretzels, ice cream, those are not considered the best carbs because they're refined, and they are probably add to your sugar for sure. What are healthier are called complex carbohydrates, like beans and nuts, things like vegetables, carrots, potatoes, and sweet potatoes especially, zucchini, squash, tomatoes. Those are examples of carbohydrate foods that contribute to your betterment rather than contributing to your glycemic index going sky high. Just to give you an example, I think you asked, what is the glycemic index?
That was my next question.
Okay, I've got actually a dictionary definition here. It's the index is the entry rate of a carbohydrate of food that you eat. For example, let's say a slice of bread. And even if you do something like a slice of whole wheat bread, the glycemic index is the rate of carbohydrate and insulin rise into the bloodstream. And the lower the glycemic index, the slower the insulin rise and the rate of absorption into your body. The rate of the insulin rise and the carbohydrate, the glycemic index, you want ideally to be the same so that they both come up at the same time. It's hard for me to pick up left or right here. Okay, if you've got glycemic, you've got let's say you're eating a piece of bread and butter. Okay, it's rising up and your insulin goes with it. And then all of a sudden the bread and butter takes off and the insulin can't quite keep up with it. And so then your body absorbs the glycemic, the glycogen, the sugar, and the insulin is still up wondering what happened and is trying to follow it. But if you do something like, let's say oatmeal is a good carb, but it's again turns immediately to sugar and gives you energy. If you add an egg to that has protein and fats, the other things that are in those big nutrients, the macronutrients, the protein and the fats combined with the carbohydrates tend to make your insulin do this together with it. And then when it starts to come down, the insulin can follow it, but it also evens it out a little more so that you get a more even energy. It lasts longer. The energy will last longer than if you were to just eat the oatmeal by itself. Add some blueberries, you can have a little more sugar, but you've also got another good carb in there. So your fruits, blueberries especially, are extremely high in antioxidants, which are good for you. And so anyway, the glycemic index, just to give you an example, a piece of bread has a glycemic index of 100, and it goes from 0 to 100. It's at the top of the list for quick insulin rise and sugar rise. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Now, we have mentioned, I mentioned Atkins and low carb, and you mentioned the glycemic index. And I think you mentioned, and you were talking about lifestyle changes being better, and the glycemic index being an important aspect of carbs. So I'm going to go to what do you recommend for your clients that have diabetes and their type 2 diabetes, especially? Well, I guess it applies to anybody with diabetes, but especially those concerned with diabetes and needing to lose weight because of obesity, and yet they have the type 2 diabetes. That in particular, what do you recommend for those clients?
Well, a combination of things. You do need carbohydrates, and I would suggest the complex carbohydrates are better. And you do need things, if you eat meats, like proteins, the meats have the highest amounts of proteins. Animal foods have the highest amounts, but you can also get proteins in something like quinoa, which is considered a grain, a gluten-free grain, but it's actually a flour. It contains about 40% protein. So combining vegetables with something like that, and vegetables with your high protein meats, whether it's beef or chicken or fish. For diabetics, I recommend a lot more fish and chicken than red meats. They're easier for the body to digest, and also combining with definitely leafy greens, such as spinach and kale, collard greens, romaine lettuce, parsleys, in that whole area, alfalfa sprouts, green beans, green peppers, because they have a lower glycemic index, so they won't raise your sugar so fast, but they will give you the energy that you'll need. And with, in a weight control, go for your protein at every meal. For example, if you're eating breakfast, I also recommend intermittent fasting, which means you leave at least 12 to 16 hours between eating dinner and then the following day eating breakfast, which gives your body time to clear a lot of the foods and whatever waste it's going to clear. And start your day with a glass of warm water or even cool water or even hot water and a large squeeze of lemon, about half a lemon's worth of juice. And start your day with that early in the morning so that it helps your body clear and cleanse. And then you can have your breakfast. But try to leave anywhere between 12 to 16 hours between dinner and breakfast, or maybe even lunch, brunch, however you want to put it. And at least 4 to 5 hours between each meal.
So you don't specifically recommend I'm sorry about I don't know why it's making, on my end, there's a kind of distorted sound that comes in. Hopefully that won't get recorded. I don't know. But you don't recommend specifically a certain level of carbs as much as you recommend paying attention to the glycemic index. Do you have your clients restrict their overall calorie intake at all?
Calorie restriction can help. Everybody's individual. So that I don't say it goes all across the board for everybody who has type 2 diabetes, because each of us is biochemically individual, and each one requires a little different regimen as far as food goes. And so for somebody with type 2 diabetes that needs to lose weight, let's say they're at 250 pounds and they need to get back down to about 180. First of all, it doesn't happen overnight, and we do it gradually, but you watch and you're mindful. This is very important. You're aware of what you're eating. You're mindful when you're shopping and of when you put foods on your plate. And there is room for something called a cheat meal per week, not a cheat day, but a cheat meal. And so that you can kickstart your metabolism again by eating something that is higher in carbs and maybe higher in protein as well. And there's also fats considered in there, because fats really aren't what make you fat. However, with some people, I would suggest a more low fat foods, such as low fat milk, or if you're drinking dairy or eating dairy, low fat cottage cheese, something like that, and definitely yogurt because it's fermented. And there are just certain foods that work for certain people and others that don't. And we also take into account sensitivities and allergies. So it's not an all across the board. The generalization, I would say, would be low carbs, higher protein, and mindfulness as far as the fats. Because you do need fats to digest vitamins D, E, A, and K.
And that was going to be my next question. That's a good segue. And I when I wrote this out, I noted after 40 years of hearing about the benefits of low-fat diet, Americans have continued to see big increases in obesity and heart disease. And you mentioned in a previous interview,
Mm-hmm.
In a previous interview, you mentioned that this may be due to the fact that we substituted the high sugar and highly processed carbs, the refined carbs, for fat. So do the experts still recommend restricting fats, especially saturated fats?
Well, there's a difference in fats. There are, quote, good fats and not so good fats. And the saturated fats are called so because they're linked, their hydrocarbons are linked very tightly, and they're hard for people to digest. It's things like vegetable oil, which I don't recommend for anybody. It's highly refined, and other saturated fats from different foods. And the body can use them, but not as efficiently as polyunsaturated or monounsaturated. Polyunsaturated fats are found in omega-3 foods, such as fish. Like I had sardines for lunch today. And so there are things like lentils and beans. Even, I would say, tuna or other fish like salmon, mackerel, cod. The omega-3s that are in those fish are far more easy to digest and far more helpful as far as fats goes. And then you do need the fats, and there are fats in any kind of meat or anything that has feet, feathers, or fins for protein. So things like cottage cheese and even a hard-boiled egg, the fats in the egg are good for you. It depends on, it would help in many instances to eat low-fat cottage cheese if you're eating dairy. But I also recommend, especially for diabetics, eating as little dairy as possible, because I've found that dairy has been causing horrible digestive problems with many people, along with gluten. But dairy in particular, and especially for women, I found that the percentage of people who cannot tolerate dairy any longer is higher with women than with men, or maybe it's just that women talk about it more than men do. But I found that dairy substitutes, things from almond milk, hazelnut milk. Um, you know, I'm not a fan of soy milk or soy products as much as I am of the almond milk and coconut milk and hazelnut. And if you need sources for those things, I can definitely help you with that.
Okay. Um, what do you, let's get back to the intermittent fasting that you mentioned, because I was going to say, we've already gone into a little bit about what you recommend for people that are diabetic and losing weight. And these things are also good for people that need to lose weight in general, whether you're diabetic or not diabetic, or just this is good advice. But as far as losing weight goes, you mentioned you've had some success with intermittent fasting, and that this involves a supplement. So you can tell us about that if you would like.
Well, there's a plethora of supplements out there. I have worked with a company for, since 1985, which I would recommend their supplements. And I know that a lot of doctors and chiropractors and naturopaths recommend the supplements from this company as well. They're not the only ones out there, but they do have very well researched and 90 plus years of history of creating their supplements from food, directly from food. And usually the body knows what to do with food versus when you're putting chemicals into the body, whether it's through eating a food that's been, sprayed with pesticides or herbicides, or it's just the chemicals that are in a particular vitamin or mineral supplement. So I would recommend the products from Standard Process. And there are a couple of other companies that I use. Unicity is one of them, and Zervita is another. And two of them are what are known as they're multi-level companies. My looking and my investigating is at their products, not their way of being paid. So what I do is recommend those products that I find work and work for my clients. And so I'm using it myself, as a matter of fact, something called Balance, which is a high fiber supplement, which helps fill one up and really kind of ease off on how much hunger you feel before a meal and how much you will actually consume. So that's one of the things that I was talking about, Pat. And eating when you're hungry, the mindfulness thing is what I really, really recommend. That sometimes, and I find myself doing the same things as other people, if you're not hungry, stay out of the kitchen.
Good advice.
And, eat fresh foods whenever possible. And the way you can tell, one of the ways that's easy to tell if you're hungry or not is try drinking a glass of water when you think you're hungry, or especially if you feel thirsty, because if you're feeling thirsty, your body's getting dehydrated and you don't want that to happen. Water is the key to keeping yourself alive. We can last for, a few weeks without food, maybe, but you can't last for much longer than that without water, because water, we are 70+% water. Our makeup is, we're gushy on the inside, and especially the brain, which is about 65% water itself. And we do need water to help move things along, to help circulate in our bloodstream, because your bloodstream needs water. So all of these things, if you're going to feel, you think you feel hungry, go get a glass of water and drink the glass of water down, and then see how you feel. Give it a few minutes, and not just because it's 12 noon and it's lunchtime do you eat. You eat it if and when you're hungry. And I know that some people feel that, well, I'm on a schedule, I'm at work and I get a lunch hour and it's at 12:30 and I have a half an hour for lunch, so I got to do something. Well, yes, but eat as much as you feel satisfied with. For example, if you bring a sandwich and let's say it's a I'm a fan of peanut butter and jelly, but almond butter is my favorite. Almond butter and jelly sandwich, and you eat half the sandwich and you feel as though, that's enough. Put the rest of it away, wrap it up, save it for later. And if you can take a break, you can take a 10-minute break and you can probably eat the other half if you're really hungry. But listen to your body. Most of us are in such a rush, especially lately, that we don't listen to our bodies, or if we do, we don't hear it. And so that's one of the things I recommend. There's an inner guide in there, and there's literally a nerve that goes from your brainstem to your stomach, to your gut. It's called the vagus nerve, and it's VEGAS. It's not Las Vegas, but you can think of it that way. But it is there to help let your brain know that your tummy's as full as it wants to be. So leave it room. And for people who want to lose weight, I do recommend drinking at least an 8-ounce glass of water before your meal, and then no liquids with your meal, and enjoy your meal. But again, do it mindfully.
And you also recommend the intermittent fasting, which is no food
Yes.
between the times, again, between what?
Finishing dinner.
Uh-huh.
And we recommend finishing dinner by 8 or 8:30 at the absolute latest, and trying to get 8 hours of sleep if that's what works for you, and it works for most people. And then not eating breakfast for at least, let it go for 12 hours. So from 8:30 to 8:30, or if you can go to 8:30 to 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock, and so on, through maybe even noon.